Well, hi everyone. Welcome to a discussion of our current problem, our resume problem that is covering the earth, right? Circumvitala, resume problem. And it doesn't matter whether you think the problem is a real issue or a fake issue, it is clear that it's manipulated. The question is, what is doing this manipulation, and how is the manipulation able to happen so strongly in the human mind? What is the medium? And that's a really important word. It's often used to say someone who communicates with other worlds, right? So what is the medium that's being used? Well, the main medium is television. Television is the main way this entire crisis has been created, presented, and projected. If one goes outside of their house, just walks outside your house, there wouldn't be much of a problem. The only problem is being presented through people's television screens day after day after day. TV equals the CV, basically. So let's look deeper at what television is, how it affects the human body and the mind, who controls what's on TV, why it's controlled that way, and how viewing a screen automatically creates a false reality in the mind. In fact, it damages the brain and makes it easily to be subliminally controlled. Now, these are not my ideas that I sort of came up with overnight. They're focused from one of the most amazing books I've ever come across, The 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television by Jerry Mander. This book came out in 1978. 1978. Before there were any thought of home computers and smartphones and screens on every billboard home area in the world. This was 1978, and he was just talking about having a television in your home was dangerous for humans. So how about now having a TV in your hands 24 hours a day? And I'm going to go through this book, which is almost 400 pages. I've condensed it to 5. So quite simply, I'm just going to give you an overview, chapter by chapter, of what Mander is presenting in this book, because what he's presenting in this book, if you take that out and put it into our day-to-day world right now, what's happening for the last 6 or 8 months, it's going to read like a semi-explanation. But if you really want the detail, you're going to have to read the book. You know, I'm just giving you a short overview of what his presentation is, and you have to go deeper than that yourself. So, something tells me we might get a bit more to the bottom of all this. Maybe not of what's going on, but a little bit more of the how it's going on. And that might help in some way. So let's begin. Chapter 1 of the book, Jerry basically presents himself as being a former advertising executive in California, and he got tired of the ad game for rich companies and began to focus mostly on ecological groups and social change organizations. Those without the money that was needed to automatically get their message anywhere they wanted. So he had to start understanding the mediums even better. How could you simplify with no money to get their message across? And his book of Understanding Television comes through that. He reminded in the book that ad revenue in the United States in 1978 was $25 billion. That's the same amount that went to higher education. Who knows what it is now, like $1 trillion for advertising maybe. It cost $30,000 for a full-page ad in the New York Times. So as such, he's reminding only rich people have real access to total advertising, and as such, only the rich have access to newspapers and television, because they're the only ones that can pay for the spots. So therefore, only the rich and big companies can influence what gets on television at any level. And you have to start remembering that right from the start. Television is something that's programmed. Let's look at some words. Television is a projection. It projects an image from a screen to a viewer. Projection. We know right away that's a dream creation metaphor. We have television channels, right? A channel being often used as a word to relate to connecting with some other spirit realm or some other realm beyond this one, to be in the place of something else, or to bring something into you and through you that's not actually you. Television has programming on it. That's a very specific word. The televisions are programs. They're programming. Who or what is being programmed? It's not the television set. It's the people watching the television set. A TV, an entire group is called a network, right? A network. And again, that's a very computerized term that in many ways what became the network of the internet started with a network of networks on TV screens. He discusses the false belief that by something on TV makes you think you've actually experienced something real yourself. I mean, if you see a certain beach or a mountain area in Africa or a protest that happened somewhere in Europe, you think you know something about it, but the problem is you weren't actually there. You've never actually experienced anything but some carefully chosen images that have been placed on the screen for you. You were not at the beach, you were not at that mountain, you were not at that protest. How many people will make a comment saying something like, oh yeah, this is going on over there in the world, or it's like this over there. How do you know that? Well, I saw it on TV. Well, you didn't see anything. You've seen a carefully chosen set of images that you have taken to be a real experience. So you have to begin already taking everything I'm going to bring out about this book and start taking, just stop every once in a while, pause the video and say, okay, how does this relate to what's been going on for 8 months? Then restart the video, go to the next little bit. Chapter 2 is mostly just about the rise of television in the 1950s. We can move on, we can move past that. Chapters 3 and 4 are more of the idea of how TV distances one from experiencing the nature of the world directly. And he reminds that we live in artificial cities, artificial everything, right? We live in artificial light, we stare at artificial screens, we eat artificial food that we have no idea where it comes from, we're hearing traffic noise all day, we're having recycled air. We're not actually connected to nature, particularly the bigger the city and the more you stay in your house, or the more you stay in an office building, the less connected you are. And this key, this disconnection, is very important for television to work its spell, because the more disconnected you are, the more likely you will be to believe what's on the television screen about nature or about the world as your own personal experience. It's kind of this odd subliminal setup. In chapter 5, he goes on to the movies Solaris and the books 1984 and Brave New World. And this is a really important chapter for where we are. And he kind of says how if you're going to control people on large scale and control their minds like these books want to be done, you need kind of 8 things. You need the elimination of personal knowledge for knowing how to think for oneself and get answers for oneself, but instead have all the answers presented by one specific authority where no thinking is required. Now that, even beyond what television gave in the 1970s, I mean, that's our world right now. There's like one source of information for everything, and the average person just believes whatever's presented to them. Very few people, even though you have the access to the internet and the access to whatever, how many billion web pages, almost nobody really digs through anything, really looks for deep information. They just take the first thing that clicks off. Oh, it says that on Wikipedia, well, that's what it is. And off they go. And that's one of the first keys to controlling people. Because if you control the main source of information, you will control the knowledge people have. Second is to eliminate points of comparing, especially with the past. If you have no memory of a different past to compare to, then you must agree that whatever's going on now must be okay. So the destruction of history, I've written and others have presented a lot about how history's been destroyed, changed, altered, completely lied about, and that's a part of this control mechanism. If you don't have any kind of proper history, you have no idea where you really are. 3 is to separate people from each other. If people can't meet and discuss, then no other points of view are ever heard. I mean, even when 50,000 people would go to a football game, a lot of the conversation that goes on isn't about the game at all. I know I used to go watch baseball games with one of my friends, and we maybe talked about the game for like 15 minutes. We talked about our lives and other stuff. It was, it was very rare we actually discussed the game we were watching while we were there. And so all of this stuff that's going on to make sure that people feel separate from each other, people are afraid of each other, so people can't discuss, can't share ideas, can't have conversations. That's an important part to the total control. The fourth one is to unify all experience, focusing on a mental experience over a sensual one. And that's about a perfect description about getting everything that you know from a screen. A screen is a mental projection device, right? It's not a sensual, actual experience with the body of something tangible, right? It's a mental experience. The next is occupy the mind. And it doesn't matter what the mind is occupied with as long as it's full. And then therefore there'll be no space to really think about anything important. 6, he wrote, was to encourage drug use. Okay, so I would now change that over time to just say any unhealthy distraction or thing that will create a place of denial so we don't have to think much again about what's going on in the world and where we really are. So any kind of distraction is useful, which of course most television actually is a distraction, right? That's what it's there for. 7, centralize knowledge and information. The people in control will run the media, and therefore everything the media says is right because there's only one message that comes through. And his 8th point to total control, like these books suggest, is to redefine happiness and the meaning of life in terms of a new and increasingly unrooted philosophy. And in order to make that work, you need a population that's alienated and confused. Then that new philosophy that you want people to believe in will offer a comforting mental order during that time of chaos. So he's laid it out right there. He hasn't even got in yet to how TV is the mechanism to make this happen, how television can create these 8 steps in a very easy way, but he's laid out, there's the steps. You want to control the population of the world? Here's what you got to have. So how much of those 8 have we got right now? Of course, he's going into more detail. He's going into detail of all this, right? I'm just presenting the simple overview of it. Again, stop. Think of those 8 points. How many have we got right now, today? Chapter 6 is mostly about advertising and the turning of certain, the creation of the belief, creating the belief that certain objects have value, usually things that have been created, modified, or manufactured, as opposed to things that are being presented as having no value, which will usually be things in their natural state. Because you can't charge more money for a thing that's in a natural state. You have to take a potato and, add a orange dot to it, and then all of a sudden you can charge more money for this special potato because the regular potato is no longer important anymore. So he has a whole chapter about this. He talks about the creation of a commodity system and the loss of the humanness that it's going to provide. And again, the work that any kind of screen, any kind of staring at a screen will automatically create separation. I mean, if 2 people are in a room but they're staring at the screen, well, they're not interacting with each other. They're interacting with the screen. The screen is the focal point, not the other people. And it's not even like being in a movie theater or a pub or a sporting event where even though a large number of people might be focused on one event, there's still a constant interaction. There's still there's a real event. You're not just, other than in the movie theater where you're just staring at a screen, there's all these other possible experiences are real experiences, right? They're not just a screen. And even though it creates a sense of isolation, right? All of these people are isolated in their homes, and even though they might all be watching the same thing, and so the next day they can all talk about what they saw in Seinfeld the day before, it's not like they've shared the experience. They've had an individual experience. It just happens the individual experiences of the same thing. Chapter 7 is more of a talk of how televisions help set up centralization of control. Because if you control television, you control information, you control the ideas, and he has a long, detailed description in there of how the 1950s television was really there to present the idea to the U.S. population of what prosperity, happiness, and security was. It takes him till chapter 8 to actually start getting into the detail of what television does specifically. So his first 7 chapters are just an overview of this is what you can kind of do subliminally. And now here's what TV is doing to people. So chapter 8 is all about this idea of television watching deadens people, spaces them out, puts them in a trance, puts them in a very hypnotic state. And even those who try to claim television relaxes them by watching them, will see that that's not actually what's happening. That's a further chapter to explain you're not actually being relaxed by television, but you're being overstimulated by it. And nobody says in a questionnaire that was handed out, should they be watching even more television? Almost nobody said, yes, I should be watching even more than I do. Most people said, no, I should be watching less. But almost everyone indicates there's some sort of trance that goes on. The constant focus on a screen was quite a danger to kids in the 1970s who were growing up without basic skills except how to change a TV channel. I mean, think of it today with 24-hour smartphones around. I mean, what skills do kids have today compared to what kids would have had in the 1800s? I'd watched one of these Ben Fogle out in the wild shows recently, a couple days ago. And there was a family in northern Canada somewhere. Father and mother and five daughters. They had 5 kids, all girls. But the 14 and 15-year-old girls, roughly that age, when they felt they needed to get out of their parents' house and have their own space on the property, they built their own house. They cut the wood, they sawed it, they carpentered it, they put in all the nails, they hauled it, they did everything. 14 and 15 years old, they could build a house. Now, how many 14-year-olds do you think, boys or girls, you could take off the street, give them a hammer and a saw, and they would know what the hell to do? It just, things like that just kind of blow your mind when you think, like, I don't have those skills. I grew up combination of television and being an athlete my whole life as a teenager. So great, I know how to hit a baseball, and I know how to skate, and I know how to do all sorts of things, but practical life skills that, this should be guaranteed. There's certain things that a human being should guarantee automatically. Just by living it, you're going to pick up certain things. Okay, I learned how to cook, I learned how to do a few other practical things, but real practicality, that's gone unless a person goes seeking it somehow themselves or lives in a situation where they are in some way required to obtain them, right? These girls did their schooling via the internet, so they know computers, they know how to use a phone, they know how to, but they still had all of these other massive skills on top of it because it was required for their existence. This was one he brings up a lot, and that is television is generally watched in a darkened room. Now there's maybe a few small lights on, but the light on the television must be the main source of light. All outside noises are shut off, and complete quiet must happen in the house. The TV must be the main focus for every one of the senses, except of course those who want to also shovel junk food in their mouth while they eat. And people choose very relaxed positions where generally their arms don't move, their legs don't move. Literally, they can be almost as if they're in a sleeping state watching the television. Even eyes, they've checked, when they move the absolute least when watching television compared to doing any other activity. The entire experience is setting up a perfect trance state. I mean, Darren Brown would be, so proud. All you'd have to do is get anyone watching television and you could hypnotize them into believing anything automatically because they're already, the entire experience sets up the trance state. But what TV watching does, or in fact watching a screen, even watching a video like this, as simple as this video is, in some levels it's creating hyperactivity in the brain based on the way the image is being presented, the flash rates, the pulse rates, the way that the coloring works. All of that stuff creates a lot of work for the brain as opposed to just like looking at the chair or even looking at a moving object. The brain and the eyes and the senses have a particular setup of how to do that. We are not set up to to view a screen and what's on a screen. So it creates a hyper stimulation in the brain. And in fact, I sometimes can get tinnitus, the ear ringing thing. It will generally only happen after I've been looking at a screen for about an hour. If I'm staring intently at a screen for some reason, it can start. And literally, if I notice that and I get away from the screen for like 4, 5, 6 hours, it'll start to just go away on its own. It's a reaction to the hypersensitivity of the brain that simply having to deal with a screen is doing. And people say that television relaxes them. What it's really doing is it's stimulating the brain to such a level that eventually the brain gets exhausted. You're not actually feeling relaxed, you're feeling that the brain is wiped out. And they're confusing being wiped out with being an actual calm state. Because again, while you're watching TV, you're being bombarded by images, bombarded by sounds, bombarded by very quick flashing images that your brain has to assimilate. So your brain is constantly being filled up with something. It's not like the brain is becoming emptied, or the brain is becoming calm, or the brain is becoming clear. None of that is happening. We're just laying all of these foundations that Jerry's presenting, so we can perhaps at the end of this see where we're at today and how this has shaped what's going on. Because I'm pretty clear that we couldn't have the situation we're in without television and computer screens and image and information coming via screen. This couldn't happen. Chapter 9 is all about the ingestion of artificial light. It's a very long, rather scientific chapter, but quite simply claiming that natural light is important for the health and well-being of the body. And if most of the light you take in is from artificial sources, not just like the light that's above me here, but the screen, it's actually doing damage to your body. And then, of course, if you add the electromagnetic frequencies, which he wasn't really aware of at the time in the 1970s, but the dangers of all the electromagnetic frequencies, the Wi-Fi, the cell phone signals, all of that. When you add that on top of it as another disturbing mechanism to the body, it's not creating a healthy environment to be in. Number 10, chapter 10 is all about how TV dims the mind. Because again, you're not thinking. It's not like you're reading a book and then pausing and thinking, making up some images, contemplating things. What you're dealing with is you're getting images again that are projected at you, and you don't get a chance to filter what's projected. It's whatever's on the screen is what comes into your head. That's what your brain is taking in. And they go so fast in many cases that there's no chance to even stop and consider what you saw, but it's registered. And that's why a lot of subliminal messaging, a lot of small little pieces of information can be put in television and movies and whatever, because if you're just watching the screen, it's going to get in and it's going to sit in the subconscious, and when the time comes that it needs it, boom. That's how a lot of advertising works. Advertising doesn't need to be good. It doesn't need to be entertaining. It just needs to stick somewhere in the back of your head so that when you get to a particular point, something in you tells you need to buy that particular product, generally to feel happy or safer. That's what advertising does. It bypasses the ability to consciously filter what goes in or what goes out. So that's a really important of what TV is doing to you. So that's all chapter 10, how it's in a sense dimming the mind. Chapter 11 and 12 is very interesting. It's all about how the brain takes the images we see on the screen and turns them into our own thoughts and our own ideas. And in fact, replaces our regular human experienced images with the images that were on the screen. So people believe the image on the screen, right? If I showed you a picture now of Jason Alexander, every single person would say, oh, it's George Costanza. No, it's Jason Alexander. He's a regular person. He's an actor. He's had a complete life. He's done a bunch of stuff. No, it's George Costanza. They actually think Jason Alexander is really George Costanza, that there's no difference. Or it's like, how about those stories more like in the 70s and 80s where some soap opera watcher would get upset with what one guy did to Constance and then sees him on the street and likes attacks him or attacks his house. You know, he's an actor. He's playing a role, but they can't distinguish between television and reality. What's on television is real, and the people who are actors on TV they are the actor in real life. It's this very bizarre thing that for many people, the mind can't distinguish the two, and I'll show how it's really hard for any of us to distinguish anything we see on television. So just for fun, think of your favorite television character right now. Somebody in a TV show that you've liked, you've watched, take an image. Okay, look how easy it was to get that image of them. You've never met them. You've never seen them in real life. You don't know anything about them. You've just watched a television show. And the image is there. It's in your head. Every television image like that is somewhere stored in your head. Now let's go deeper. Now think about, say, like Tibet. Or think about lions in the Serengeti. Or think about the Normandy beachhead in 1944. Think about ancient Rome. Okay, you got images, I'm sure, for many of those. Now, you've probably, in most cases, never been to any of those places. I don't think you were at Normandy in 1944, but you got an image of it. And that image is likely coming from a television show or a documentary or a movie. On the outside source, it might have come from a photograph in a book for a few people, but mostly it's going to come from some sort of televised screen image. And the problem is you've conjured up the images thinking you're seeing a real image. But all you're seeing is, again, a projection of something that somebody wants you to see about what they want you to at least think these places look like. Right? The movie is presenting lions in the Serengeti, but you're not really sure, were the lions in the Serengeti? Are the lions happy? Are the lions unhappy? Have they been fed? Have they not been fed? You don't know anything about them. You just know an image that they've put together on the screen, but you've taken it to be total reality. Now, how about taking a sporting event? Whether it's a baseball game, a football game, basketball, hockey, it doesn't matter. But just pick a favorite sport that you like to watch sporting events of, and just think about that for a second. Okay. Now, this is something you've probably actually been to. You probably, in your life, have been to some live baseball or football game. But in the image you put in your mind, was the image of a live event you actually went to, your kid's game, a game you went and watched and sat in the seats, or did you get a televised, something you saw on television? And bizarrely, Mander says that when people normally do that exercise, the first image that will appear would be a television event of that sporting event rather than something they attended actually in person. It's again showing the depths of how this stuff, how the images from the screen take over the mind, and that even your own experiences are going to get squashed out and replaced by television, as if the image on television has more importance, more depth, becomes more real than the actual experiences you've had. So again, are you seeing how easy this is for the people who go out on the street on a daily basis? They experience whatever they experience of what's going on. Not really much of a problem out there, but if they come home and television tells them there's a big problem, you should be afraid and scared, well, television says that, so it blocks out whatever their own experience was and replaces that in front of it. Are you seeing how the medium is required for what is going on? That without it, you know, that joke I made in the last video when they were saying to the Amish, how come you don't have any of these, cases in your community? And they just said, well, we don't have television. That's kind of where this talk originated from, that little joke that I made. But it's chapter 13 and 14 is all about information loss, how television or any screen is a terrible way to present information compared to having it in book form, or of course, best of all, having it in a one-to-one direct conversation or direct experience. Of course, that's the absolute best. The best way to know anything is to experience it personally. Television or screen is the worst possible method of information transfer. And you also see that television, and especially the media, is what these chapters talk about. They act like a microscope on the world, right? And the news media there was 1 billion events that have happened today all over the world. Billions of events. But the news media picks out 2 or 3 or 4 and decides, small group of people decide, these are the events that 1 billion people should pay attention to, that all the other events, in a sense, don't really matter. They're not important. We're squeezing all of them out, and you're only allowed to focus on these ones that we have chosen for you. And they're also choosing to show you what parts of the event they want to show you. Remember, they're not choosing entire events, right? They're choosing the part of the event that presents the message they want presented and presents it in such a way that gets into your mind in a very short period of time. You know, a 3-hour protest might have 2 hours and 59 minutes of complete and total calm, nothing going on. It's just people standing there protesting. 2 or 3 people get into a fight for something, and it could have nothing to do with the protest. They could just get in a fight over somebody realized some guy was sleeping with his girlfriend last week, and they just, you know, but TV gets that image, and that's what'll be on the screen. You'll see that 30-second fist fight and be presented chaos at the protest. Well, no, there really wasn't chaos, and there was a little fight that took place for 30 seconds, then it got handled and everything else was fine. But this is how television chunks. It chunks the possibilities of events and then chunks the event into smaller and smaller pieces, and you only get to see pieces. You don't get to see the whole thing, but it presents it as if like whatever small piece it's shown to you, that's the entire event shown to you. Remember, those who control TV control what events are being shown. Someone or a small group is programming, remember the word, they're programming and selecting what is being presented. News is limited to what those in charge want the news to be. There's no chance for a wider group of people to make choices on what kind of news do we want to have on our newscast today. It's what the small group decides, this is what the news is. Simple as that. Another important point of what television puts on, it puts on specific things because for television, because of the way it's set up, specifically they need to show close-ups of faces. Faces are the best way for television to display anything they want to display. Things in the background, things that are farther. The more further back you try to go, the worse television can try to present that. It can't present the Grand Canyon properly. It can't present the fields of Africa. It can't present the Giza pyramids, but it can present particularly certain emotions: anger, hate, fear, jealousy, winning and losing, sickness and death. These are very easy to show on television because they're very specific facial measures, and they're very specific body language things, and there's usually some sort of outburst involved, some sort of extra energy that comes into it. Things like friendship, or quiet, or calmness, or love, just sort of a love that has more of a friendship to it. That can't be shown on television very well. Death is easy, life is impossible. How about caring or warmth? How is television able to show that? And it can't. And again, this is the whole idea is television is also designed to present what it can present well. They say, oh yeah, there's violence on television because people want violence. No, there's violence on television because it's about the only thing that television can properly and easily present. To try to present caring and warmth on television would require an unbelievable amount of time and preparation and thought behind it as to how to make that happen. TV is perfect to show crisis. Calm and happy is not good for TV. So TV, not only does TV is there to present crisis, it has to, if necessary, it will manufacture crisis in order to get people to watch it. Remember, television needs viewers because viewers are there to supposedly support the advertisers' products that are paying big money to keep the programming on. And so if viewers aren't watching, the advertisers stop paying, nobody's making any money. And this is quite simply, it's all business. And so crisis creates business. It's obvious. He then goes on for the rest of chapter 14 to talk about many misleading and false news stories of the time. Chapter 15 is about how television is very artificial and it's all manipulated. If you read chapter 15 of Jerry Mander's book, you will have trouble watching a television show, an advertisement ever again. Because he explains to you that television by its very nature will bore you, generally. It's a boring medium. And the way they keep you hooked into it is by camera tricks. You'll notice about every 7 to 10 seconds, there will be some sort of switch. There will be a camera change. There will be a zoom in. There will be a zoom out. There will be a flash of something on the screen. There will be a different noise that gets created. Some music gets played and something gets put out every 7 to 10 seconds so that your mind doesn't tune out. If you just like put on the screen, like he talked about, somebody decided to like just show the ocean, like literally just put a camera on the ocean and then just turn it on the screen. People were bored in like, minutes. Nothing was happening. Because for that, to keep you sucked to the screen, they need the camera tricks. And advertising does it even more. The camera tricks in an ad will come every 2 to 3 seconds to make sure that your mind is tricked enough to keep watching. It's interesting that, even though this is just one camera and a guy talking on the screen, somebody in one of the comments in the last video, he said something like how he likes to, I think he meant bike riding. I think he means like going mountain biking, and he would put, I guess, the video play it on his phone or something and put headphones on and then listen to me while he rides. Well, thanks, that's cool. But that's also really interesting because then he's not getting any visual images at all of any of these conversations. He's just hearing the words. He's just hearing the words, which is a much safer mechanism for the brain. It's a much safer mechanism for even for the body. Like Matt does a lot of, sometimes he just does those radio broadcasts where there isn't even an image on the screen at all. And it's like you just walk around your house and you just hear him in the background. And actually there's a higher chance of, more likelihood of direct information being able to be understood and taken in than having to watch a bunch of constant images flashing on the screen. It's one of the reasons when I do historical videos or videos that I put images in, I try to limit the images that I use, and I try to keep them either on the screen for a really long period of time or just put them on a little bit and then just take it off, and then you're just stuck looking at my ugly face. There's a reason I'm doing that, is because I'm trying to not trick your mind too much. I'm trying to just give you the image, an image that I think is helpful for you to understand what I'm talking about, but then try to sort of get rid of the camera trick, if you might say. I read a lot of this Jerry Mander stuff years ago, and so the more anything is using a camera trick or flashes or screens or whatever else, it's actually harder for your brain to take in whatever information is being presented. That the more simpler the presentation is on the screen, the more slow you might say it is, or relaxed, the more likely that you can actually bring that information in. The more likelihood you won't be as manipulated, because you'll have time to go from image to image and what is that? What am I looking at? What does that make sense? What is being presented? So that's in chapter 15. The last chapter he finishes with, chapter 16, he finishes with 33, yes, 33 television biases. Not 30, as you would probably think, 33. And it can't be by accident. I mean, I looked at the 33. You could have easily combined a couple of these to make it 30. So something in here tells me that part of it tells me that he's, on some level, he's telling you, like, I've just told you all this stuff about television. I've told you how bad it is. I've told you how it'll actually control the human race and control your mind. And here's the 33 things I don't think anyone's going to do anything about it. I don't think it's going to happen. But here's some of the 33 biases, right? Like, war on television is better than peace. Chaos is better than calm. Violence is better than nonviolence. Cars or products are better than living things. Religions with charismatic leaders like Billy Graham or Reverend Moon or L. Ron Hubbard are better on television than nature-based religions like Zen Buddhism or American Indians or Druids. Political movements with charismatic leaders are better than regular movements. The one is easier than the many. The personality or the symbol is easier than philosophy. Superficiality is easier than depth. Verbal information is easier to convey than sensory information. And remember, television is best when it can present numbers and charts and graphs and just an image on the screen, and then the expert standing behind talking about, oh, you see 53% of this and 44% believe this, and we went to the poll and 61% of the people think that, and there it is on the screen. And so you're bringing in the numbers and the information, and that television is great at presenting that kind of stuff. But sensory information, what it's like to experience a forest, how nice it is to be at a lake, or what it's like to go to Teotihuacan in Mexico. Television can't possibly do anything with that. Zero. It can just show you some images, but no sense, no feeling, right? Lust is better on television than satisfaction. Anxiety is better than tranquility. On the other hand, anger is better than anxiety. Jealousy is better than acceptance, right? Materialism, acquisition, and ambition work better than spirituality, openness, and calmness. Doing is better to convey than being. Loud is better than soft. Linear is better than something that comes as a matrix or has a dimension. The fixed is better than the fluid. The bizarre will always get more attention. Facts concerning the moon were better on television than poetry concerning the moon. I'm just going through picking a few of these at random. Quantity is better than quality. The finite is better than the infinite. And again, death is easier to present than life. So that's the overview of what Jerry Mander was already saying the dangers of television are, and why it's dangerous for individual people and why it's dangerous for the entire actual population. And that's even before he had the idea that everyone's going to carry around their own personal little television set with them, and this television set can actually even know what they're doing, know what they're thinking, know what they're saying, know where they've been, know where they're going, know what they bought. This is just television in your home. And he thought, this is really, really bad. He's still alive. I've watched a couple of his interviews over the years. I didn't check one out today. I've had this, just going through this book has taken me like 6 hours for you today. And I don't know how he's sort of stepped this up to even add all the other, but I'm sure he would just say something like, yeah, the world now is my book on steroids, probably, right? So could this crisis be currently happening without television? I don't think so. The actual outside real world experience everybody would be having couldn't possibly create the kind of fear and terror that the images and the presentation on the screen has provided. The actual day-to-day experience for everybody would be just, perhaps, oh, that's too bad. It's a shame to hear about Jim. I hope he's okay tomorrow. Yeah, okay, Other than that, there would be no change, right? There'd be no change in anything. It's TV that has got people to the point to say, oh, something has to be done. Please save us from this thing that TV is a big part of that. Again, because, and TV can present it all with charts and numbers and images and flashes and talking experts. But TV will never, particularly if it has a message it wants to get through, TV will not take time for the opposite viewpoint. Two viewpoints are almost never allowed on television. One viewpoint is allowed here, a second, perhaps opposite viewpoint is allowed, as long as then the main viewpoint can be counterbalanced to it and drive it back into the ground. TV is about one thing and one thing only. One message all the time. Right? So what's really going on, I think if we could really narrow this down to whatever's going on, it's going on in one place. It's going on in human minds. This current insanity, the only crisis is in people's minds, and what's in their mind is a projection that's come out of their television set, their smartphones, their computers. If the whole world tomorrow turned them all off, if you literally turned off every television set in the world, every computer in the world, and every smartphone in the world, gone, and did away with newspapers for 60 days, what would be happening? How do you think things would be going? Okay, beyond the withdrawal symptoms that the average person go through for a few weeks. Like getting off some of this stuff is like getting off crack cocaine, right? It's that addictive. But what kind of situation would we be in right now? The situation would just end, because the real world experience that everybody would be having could not possibly match what they're being presented they should be feeling and thinking. I'll leave this with one last thing, and that was the last thing I saw before I started this video, was an article in Atlantic magazine, and it's called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" And I'm going to also link to that below. It was a really well-written article. Of course, Atlantic has some very good writers that write for it. And fantastic article about internet and searching and information availability, and how that makes you more stupid rather than smart. Fabulous article. Well, I'll leave that there. My overview of the 4 arguments for the elimination of television. Highly recommended book. If you haven't read this book, you really should. It'll just blow your mind. Like I said, this is an overview. The depth that he put into this is fantastic. Do I agree? Would I agree with everything? No. Would you agree with everything? No. But 80% of it is like enough to get you go, wow, right? So thanks for the likes, the subscriptions, the comments. They're appreciated. Thanks for, buying my books. And I think there's still a place, of course, in this world for printed, held books, a place where you can take the shared thoughts of a person and sit under a tree and read it at your own pace, at your own speed. Donations are always appreciated. May not realize how much work goes into this. Like I say, I probably started this today for you around 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's now, I guess, close to 7 or 7:30, and I've really only stopped to have some lunch and make some food and go for a walk a couple times just to clear my mind and get some fresh air. Otherwise, I've been preparing this. So, small donations here and there are helpful to kind of keep me going. I put a lot of time into this, and it's appreciated. Thanks again for people who suggest things. That's always nice, whether it's to suggest a movie I might be interested in, or a book that I may have not seen or read, or another YouTube channel that, hey, you should look out this person, they have some interesting stuff. So those are appreciated. I do read a lot of all the comments, like pretty much every comment that goes in down below, unless they get to like 500 or 600 or something. I do read them, and I feel bad that I don't answer every single one of them. I just have to make a limit. Certain ones just draw me for some reason to answer, and other ones I just go sometimes, oh, that's interesting, oh, that was really nice, I really appreciate that, but I don't have time to specifically answer every single one of you, but that doesn't mean I haven't actually read them all. So I'll leave that there. There's a little overview of TV and how that might be laying an interesting foundation as to where we are right now, and maybe have you make some choices as to how you want to move forward in your information gathering procedures. Because bizarrely, the internet is the greatest place now to get information and knowledge and possibility. There's no way we could know a lot of what's going on without it. Yet at the same time, it's also potentially a way of actually drawing in and locking us, and it's this dual-edged sword, right? It's got this positive side and got this negative side, and we have to really recognize that. So thanks. I might take a few days of a little break here, but I'll read all your comments and come back with something Sunday or Monday. Cheers.